My name is Esther Baldwin, and I am the Policy and Engagement Manager with the Black Appalachian Coalition. And I'm here today with our Executive Director and Founder, Bishop Marcia Deakins, to talk about our Black Wave initiative. How are you doing this morning, Bishop?
Yeah, that's a good old question. Like, how am I doing? I'm doing good. I'm doing good. Yeah.
Can you tell me a little bit about where the name and idea for the Black Wave came from?
It came from Fury. Um, I was sitting down and I was having a conversation with someone, and I always joke, like, the fury of 500 jungle beasts just rise up, and that's when I'm like getting on my soapbox.
Uh-huh.
And I was just having a conversation actually with Amy, our development director, and was just talking about how the narrative around politics and the election has really been used for political will in the Appalachian region. But also talking about the fact that there's a story inside of all of this. And then I got angry and I was like, you know what? We don't need a red wave. We don't need a blue wave. We need a black wave, so we can tell the story, of Black people and our richness in this. And, so looking at how we are under attack and everything about us is being assaulted.
Yeah.
I just said, we all have somebody who has a place in this. So we have our people who are out there pounding the pavement, and they're getting people registered to vote. And then there are people who are making plans for, get out the vote. And then there's people who, all these different plans. But what we forget is, like, number one, this has been an iterative process that has an iterative story. And because there's so much apathy and despair, the question that also, was raised in bringing this up is, like, how do we get us reactivated and re-inspired and encouraging others to take an action through the stories that we begin to share about how vital and critical we are. And so when we come up together, and I had that visual, it's like a black wave. It's a ripple effect happening here. Yeah.
I love that. What are you most excited about? What are you hoping will come out of this?
What am I most excited about? I get excited every time I hear the word Black Wave, because it reminds me of the power that we have. It reminds me of the domino effect. And as I said before, the ripple effect of our voices. And when we come to this point of our understanding our identity and our stories inside of our identity and our heritage and our history, all of that excites me, because it reminds me that we have the power in our hands. Yes, our voice is our vote, but while they're still trying to take that away, we still get to amplify our voice, to help people understand the importance of voting. I'm excited that it's something that can trickle down and bring in the voices of young people, our elders. It gets us to recall and remember our ancestral history and the reason why we exist and why we fight. And while we are always in a fight, it's a story about our fortitude and our stamina that reminds us that we're like oak trees. You can bring in the storms and the high winds and all of that. We're just we're gonna bend with the breeze. We will bend and we will sway, but we won't be broken.
Our roots run deep.
There you go. Our roots run deep. Yeah. How, understanding. See, people don't know, they don't know Esther like, we know Esther. So one thing I think you bring to this, and I'd like you to speak to before we go, is you have this background. You worked on the Andrew Yang campaign, and you talked about, getting his name on the ballot. And this has been like your forte, and you've been a force, to my understanding. And so what would you say to our young people? Because you're younger than me. Hey, y'all, but that means I'm 25 and she's 21.
There we go.
But what would you say to our young people who don't know, and, coming out of the Black Wave, what are some of the ways that we can help people to engage in their community so that they can bring about the change that we need starting in our local communities.
Absolutely. Well, first thing I would say is pay attention to what the Black Appalachian Coalition is doing, because we are looking at policy and engagement. My shop is looking at deploying a 12-month strategy for engagement so that we can look beyond just these presidential cycles, so that we understand that the power of our voice. I think one thing that the younger generation doesn't recognize is how powerful those voices are. It's why we can disengage from the process, because we feel like our voices are not being heard. And we see that cycle after cycle, politicians come into our communities, they pander to us, they placate, but then there's no delivery on those promises. But I would argue that it is our job, it is incumbent upon us to hold them accountable to the promises to us. And so that's why we have to leverage or we have to execute on a 12-month strategy, a regular engagement strategy where we get to know our elected officials and they get to know us, where they're familiar with the issues of their constituents. And as we're growing up, I'm a millennial, but we got the Zoomers coming up under us. We all have distinct issues within our age groups. And so making sure, again, that our voices are at the table. And particularly, this is important to me within the Black Appalachian Coalition, because I'm an Appalachian girl. I grew up in Southern Ohio, Portsmouth, Ohio. Shout out to Portsmouth, P-Town, my people. And I didn't always feel seen. I didn't always recognize myself as a member of that community, of the Appalachian community. And so when conversations were being had about investments, even though I was very young then, it's not something that I would necessarily would have plugged into. And people my age that remain there today are not necessarily plugged into, because we don't feel like we deserve a seat at that table. And so it's cultural awareness, as we always talk about, Bishop, understanding that our identities are inclusive of these things, and that Appalachia doesn't look one way. It has many different ways that it presents, and I'm one of them. And so I'm glad that I get to come here and be a part of the solution in raising our voices and making sure that our issues are being heard, and that we are leveraging those stories toward policy change. And so that's why I'm excited. I'm excited about the Black Wave for that reason. I'm excited to call in my generation and those under me to remind, and those above me, to remind us not only us, but also our elected official, that power emanates from the people. And we don't have any power because we're not leveraging it properly. And so I have some ideas about how we can do that better. And I'm hoping to bring that to our organization and to our region. So if you had one thing to invite folks into this, what would you ask them? How would you solicit their stories in this Black Wave?
That would be my ask. That's really how I would, solicit it. I would ask, what is your story? What would you have to, I'd ask our elders, what do you have to say to the young people, so that they can understand, the importance of it. I would ask people to reach out to you, because you're over the Black Wave, give us a written story, send a short video, go on Facebook and be like, I have something to say. And what? Say it. We have to say, go on X, say it. We have to get to a point where we are not afraid of the sound of our voice, and we are not afraid to articulate and cultivate a new conversation to build a political will that is not just inclusive of us, but formed and articulated by us. My hope is that we understand the importance of articulation and the storytelling, because if you're not mentioned, you're not in the room. If you're not articulated, you don't exist. And that has been the historical play in the playbook.
That's right.
It comes to Black people. Yep. Yeah. Esther, so it's like, and so I think like we got the podcast, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. And written stories are good.
Yeah.
Imagery is good. Send us some pictures, y'all. Send some pictures.
We want to hear your story. So if you have an interest in adding your voice to the wave, I ask that you reach out to me, Esther Baldwin. That's Esther, ESTHER, at the Black Appalachian Coalition.org. Esther at the Black Appalachian Coalition. We're looking forward to amplifying your voice and your story. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you. Well, I think they've heard it. They got it from old school or this, as I like to say, the seasoned one.
That's right. That's right.
'Cause I'm
Our,
seeing,
our
we're
wisdom
seasoned,
bearers, right?
right? And young folk, and I think as you're closing out, just a reminder that the best power that we have is when we're infused together,
Absolutely.
and it's going to take
All of
the
us.
elder to sit with the younger,
Right.
because this is not just about 2024.
Mm-mm.
This is about our future. And what I am excited about, as we, and thanking you for talking with me, is the legacy work that this presents, because it is legacy work, is artwork. It's a framework of our pain and of our history, and how they're trying to erase out our culture and our voice,
That's right.
and our identity, because the work of our work, when you use the word Appalachian, it's not just about mountains, it's about identity, it's about history,
That's
and,
right.
and it's about the roots that, even though the tree is gone, the stump still has the roots.
That's right.
And even though they may think that we're the stump, the bottom line is we're still rooted and we're still growing. And what people don't realize is the most powerful process takes place underground, not above ground. You just see the results of what happens.
That's right.
And so I'm excited, for all of those reasons and more. And thank you.
Thank you, Bishop.